It is estimated that around 5,000 years Korea began. They say that the founder of Korea was Tangun. I am Tanshi. So I jokingly say I descend down from Tangun. I'm not Chinese. I was born in Seoul, South Korea. I am made in Korea. 250 years ago, the U.S. was born. Nobody thought that these 13 little colonies had any chance to defeat the mighty British Empire, which was the most powerful empire of that time. George Washington led a bunch of ordinary citizens to fight against the strongest empire in the world. These were farmers, these were merchants, these were teachers, these were even pastors, these were bankers, these were ordinary U.S. citizens. And when Valley Forge was the place where the Continental Army of the United States was huddled together without shoes, without socks, without warm clothes, without much chance or ability to fight, George Washington knelt down in prayer before Almighty God. On this 250th anniversary of the United States, in the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., they are featuring prominently the painting of George Washington kneeling down Valley Forge to pray to Almighty God. They did not have proper food at that time. When the soldiers would ask, what is there for eating dinner, they would only be able to eat rough bread roasted over the fire and water. Valley Forge is very cold in the wintertime. And in the midst of that coldness, in the thick of that war, Washington was about to lose many of his soldiers because their time of commitment to fight in the war had already finished. He lined up all the soldiers there. And he said to the ones who were about to leave, he said, "Thank you, you have done your duty to the country. You are free to leave. However, if you leave now, while the fate of the country hangs in the balance, you may not have a home to go back to. You may not have a country to live in. You have done your duty, you have kept your promise. But if you want to have a country, if you want to have a home to go back to, I'm going to ask for you to stay with me and continue to fight." So the drums rolled and the music played, and George Washington said, "All who are willing to continue to fight, step across this line." One by one, soldiers crossed that line and decided to fight together with George Washington to save the country. When that time was done, most of the soldiers agreed to stay. And that is how George Washington saved the Continental Army to fight and to continue the fight for freedom against Great Britain. In the midst of Valley Forge, the Revolutionary Army decided to continue to fight. But did you know that in that war, they lost most of the battles that they fought? George Washington lost battle after battle. But he kept on fighting, he kept his army together, and he won the war. So too can you win the fight for freedom here in Korea. There are hardships, there are difficulties, there is oppression, there is repression. But I'm here to say to you, you can win. Fighting for your country, fighting for freedom, fighting for liberal democracy, fighting for this constitutional republic is worth it. There was another time in U.S. history where the United States was almost destroyed. This was during the Civil War period of the United States. There were more American casualties that died in the Civil War than all the wars in U.S. history through the Vietnam War combined. And all the other wars that, besides the Vietnam War that came before it, all of them combined, the Civil War had more casualties than that. In the midst of this crisis, God raised up a man named Abraham Lincoln. There are more books written about Abraham Lincoln than anyone else in all of human history except for Jesus Christ. And Abraham Lincoln said that in the midst of these difficulties, that he felt like he was frequently driven to his knees to pray. He said the question is not, is God with us? The question is, are we with God? One of the turning points of the war was the Battle of Gettysburg. And he gave the Gettysburg Address after the Union Army won that critical turning point battle. And at that time, Abraham Lincoln spoke memorable words, even though he said that his words would be forgotten. And he said that these soldiers gave their last full measure of devotion. And he said at the very end of the speech that this is about whether this country that is of the people, by the people, and for the people can remain on this earth and not perish. And I'm saying to you that you are fighting for a country that should be by the people and for the people and of the people. You are in the midst of unrestricted hybrid warfare. In North Korea, they are preparing roads from which they could come and attack South Korea. The Chinese Communist Party is bribing and threatening and blackmailing your leaders. That is why, because there is such corruption that has crept into the leadership of this country and such theft of elections through election fraud, that is why I've been publicly saying that the National Assembly should be dissolved, that Lee Jae-myung should resign, that the NEC should be dismantled, and that AWEB should also be dismantled. Last I saw, there are over 400,000 signatures on a petition calling for the impeachment and removal of Lee Jae-myung. That number is growing rapidly, and let's see how high it can go. As you all know, when the Korean War started, the South Korean forces were pushed back very quickly, and it was only the small little tip of Korea, the Pusan perimeter, that was all that was left of South Korea. And at that point, it looked like there was no way to win the war. People felt helpless and people felt hopeless. The U.S. decided to intervene on behalf of Korea. General Douglas MacArthur planned the Incheon landing, which had an extremely low chance of succeeding. But it succeeded, and it split the North Korean forces in half and started the drive back up the peninsula. And Korean forces fought alongside the U.S. forces as well as the military of 16 other countries. And together, they pushed up and were almost going to win in the other direction. Douglas MacArthur at that time, he wanted to bomb North Korean and CCP forces that were hiding in China across the border. President Harry Truman says, don't do that. And he removed Douglas MacArthur from command. Lee Seung-man also wanted to push ahead and attack to reunify Korea again. I think that Lee Seung-man and Douglas MacArthur were right. They should have pushed up and won the war and liberated North Korea and reunified the peninsula. But that did not happen. So it is left to us in our time in history to finish the work that MacArthur and Lee Seung-man were not able to finish. Here in this time and through this segment of history, I believe that South Korea can be recovered and that there could be the reunification of the Korean Peninsula in our time. Since the Korean War, U.S. soldiers and Korean soldiers have fought side by side in every war that the U.S. has fought. There is no ally like South Korea that has done that. It was said during the Vietnam War that if you wanted to survive the Vietnam War, stick close to a South Korean Marine. But for the first time in the history of the alliance, when the U.S. has been fighting in Iran, Lee Jae-myung has not sent any support to help America. This has never been the case in the history of the alliance. Instead, he sent money to Iran. When a South Korean vessel was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, he did nothing. Instead, he said ridiculous things about Israel. He likened what the Israeli military was doing to the Holocaust. That is outrageous. And I ask the Israeli government to take full notice of what he said. Here in South Korea, there is an attempt to set up a communist dictatorship. It is trying to destroy freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and free exercise of religion. There will be laws on July 7th that will become operational that are trying to further destroy these rights. These freedoms and rights should not be destroyed, and you, the people, because these are rights that are ultimately given by God, should continue to stand on these rights, stand on these freedoms, even though this oppressive regime is trying to pretend like they don't exist. Over at the Olympic Park, I saw with my own eyes the little shelters that the students would use to stay there, to guard that place, even through the night. They were sleeping in little shelters on the concrete through the night. And the dedication of these young people and the dedication of all the citizens who have gone to the Olympic Park is contrasted with the violence and brutality of the police who recently came in. A large number of police stormed into the Olympic Park and threw away and chucked those little shelters of the students who were there and threw them away as if they were garbage. When there was an elderly man who went down on his knees to plead to the members of the National Assembly to help the country of Korea, he was thrown around, pushed around, and handcuffed. Is this any way to treat the citizens of Korea? This is not a police state. It should not be ruled through violence and force through police action. The people are the sovereigns of this country. And when the police came to one of the entrances, they removed the people who were blocking that entrance by force. All these people want is a free and a fair and transparent election. And yet they're being physically dragged by police away. And Lee Jae-myung is sitting there saying, there was no election fraud, right? Wrong, wrong, wrong. The people are right, and Lee Jae-myung, people in the National Assembly, the NEC, and AWEB people are wrong. I have on this pin what the people have been shouting. 부정선거, 재선거. You are right. If the ballot box is invaded and destroyed, if your elections are destroyed, then you no longer get to choose who represents you in the government. That is why the people in the National Assembly, I believe most of them were not chosen by you, should be replaced by those who you choose. And the NEC, which is messing up the elections, should be eliminated, and you should run your own elections. And AWEB has no good purpose and should be completely destroyed. And you, the people, selected President Yoon as your president, so President Yoon should come out of jail and become the president again. And it is Lee Jae-myung, who was not elected by the people but stole the election, and who is overall responsible for the elections in this country, who should not only resign, but should be thrown in jail. He should resign, but if he refuses to resign, he should be impeached and removed. And if he is not impeached and removed, he should be removed by the UN Central Command. This country is not supposed to be of and by and for Lee Jae-myung. This country is of and by and for you, the people. And in this time of crisis, I am calling for the United States to come and help its blood ally, South Korea. Do you see this man over here? He is a fighter. He is not scared of anyone. This is the man that after he is shot, stands back up and says, "Fight, fight, fight!" And this fighter believes that he has been preparing his whole life to fight against communism. So he will fight the communists inside the United States. He fought against the communists in Venezuela. He is fighting against the communists in Cuba. And I want to say, Mr. President Trump, you have a big communist fight to fight on the Korean Peninsula. Mr. President, the Korean people are looking to you desperately for help. Hear their cries for help across the Pacific Ocean. Just recently, the House Judiciary Committee issued a report about how the Lee Jae-myung administration is persecuting Coupang. This is a Fortune 150 American company. It is a company that Koreans love, as it's like the Amazon of Korea. You order something late at night, and it arrives before you wake up. And American members of Congress are mad about how Coupang is being treated by the Lee Jae-myung regime. Lee Jae-myung is saying, we're not doing anything wrong. Then what about the early morning raids on Coupang offices? What about the interrogation of Coupang employees? What about the NIS action that they were demanding in terms of recovering a laptop in a Chinese river and then denying it afterwards? What about travel banning the CEO of Coupang? And the American government is mad about this. American leaders are putting out publicly that this South Korean regime is attacking American companies and attacking American citizens. Along about 130 some years ago, the U.S. missionary Appenzeller founded the Peje School. And this baseball team says, let's go to Starbucks. What's wrong with that? And yet this Lee Jae-myung administration, they're acting like the communists that they are, and they're demanding re-education of the baseball team at Peje High School. That's ridiculous. Let's go to Starbucks? Seriously? What's wrong with that? Go to Starbucks, order from Coupang, enjoy all these things. Stick it to Lee Jae-myung and his administration. Do not let South Korea become like North Korea and become a communist bastion. And you are doing such a good job of fighting. You are not helpless. You are not hopeless. You, the people, have the power. You, the people, have the ability to turn this situation around. Do it, I say. Do it for the sake of the generations that will come after you. Do it to make history. Do it for your rights and your freedoms and for the just rule of law. It may look right now like there is little to no hope and that you are not able to do much of anything. That's the way it looked for the Americans in the Revolutionary War. That's the way it looked at times in the U.S. Civil War. That's the way it looked at the beginning of the Korean War. But every single one of those wars was won. You too can win Korea's future. And as President Trump said, I want to urge you to fight, fight, fight. Thank you very much.
감사합니다.